Hello gamers and welcome to Game Up. I'm Elwood
I'm Kim.
and this is our top 10 games reviewed in 2017. 2017 has been something of a mixed bag here at Game Warp Towers as we've not only looked at independent titles, we've looked at some mainstream titles as well. And I think looking back over our back catalogue of titles this year, it's safe to say that it's certainly been one of our most diverse years here on the show. I mean, how's 2017 obviously been for yourself, Kim, in terms of gaming?
I think mixed bag is a really, really good way to say it. I mean, a lot of the games we looked at, I would go to say that not a ton of people have played, and it's ranging, a few of them are ranging in like the really indie titles. But I mean, it's been a pretty mixed bag. We had a few that, pretty mid-range titles. I think the year started a little rocky where we were just constantly pounded with games that were really challenging as 2017 releases that kind of made us going into like April being a little bit skeptical about how the year was going to go.
Yeah, I think certainly when we look at the titles that we've covered this year, it's not just been any one particular type of game that we've covered. I mean, we've had independent games, we've had walking simulators, we've had sports games, we've had puzzle games, shoot 'em ups, and real nice little indie horror games. It's There's been such a diverse bag, and I think certainly going into the year, you don't really know which way it's going to go. You don't know what's going to come out or what you're going to get keys for, and I think certainly this year has certainly been reflected that, and I think it's been great at the same time that we've had some really great discoveries. We've had some fun people on the show and had some fun interviews as well. So yeah, it been overall, it's been a really great year for gaming, and certainly when we look ahead to the 2018 schedule, I think it's only with more excitement looking forward of what we've still got to cover. I know we've got a few games already sort of like penciled in for the start of the year, but it's sort of like between what we've got coming up for ourselves here on the show, what we're going to be playing in our spare time. I don't think it's. I think it's been a while since we've had a gaming year as exciting as what we obviously have ahead of us in 2018. So
Yeah, I agree. 2018, like 2018 is definitely a year to look forward to. I mean, if anything, this year we like collectively together. I think this is important to note is that these 10 games that we're looking at tonight that topped our list is collective games that we've reviewed. Obviously, if you go over to thatmomentin.com, you're going to see that we separately also reviewed a lot of games. Elwood went into the Uncharted 1 and 2 reviews and showed how it's still relevant, how it's still a really good gaming experience. He even went back to a childhood game that he never really finished, Echo the Dolphin, which he will probably roll his eyes and laugh at me about right now because I would bother him all the time whether he finished that one. And
yeah,
even for myself, I looked at a lot of mobile games. So,
it's just constantly surprising the avenues at which gaming now takes. It's no longer just the case of gaming's on just the one platform. You now have multiple platforms with both like mobile, PC gaming, as well as console gaming and handheld gaming. It's just all these different avenues that we can now explore through gaming. And I think we've certainly tried this year to try and cover as many avenues as possible. We've also tried to do more retro gaming as well, which is always fun to go back and revisit titles. And certainly when we go through the top 10, you will notice that the titles that have made our list aren't just of 2017 releases. There's been titles that we've essentially been playing catch up with, and it's been nice to see whether they still hold that relevancy now that they did when they were released. Because time and time again, you can see a game be released, a huge hype, and then it's pretty much forgotten a couple of months down the line. And it's always good for ourselves, even though perhaps may seem that we're like sort of a little late to the race, to still obviously go back and look at these games and see if they're still relevant, see if they still hold up. So we're going to get into our list now. As I said, this is the top 10 of games we've reviewed here on the show in 2017. But kicking us off at number 10, Kim, what starts our countdown?
Our 10th game of this year is Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, developed by the Chinese Room.
Yeah, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is pretty much the definitive walking simulator. Certainly, it's the game which essentially gave us that term to begin with. I think you could argue if it was this or it was Firewatch that sort of first gave us that term, but certainly Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, a game which came out to massive critical acclaim, and certainly a title which I wouldn't recommend picking up if you're looking for huge action set pieces because this really isn't that sort of game.
Yeah, but Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. We struggled a lot before we decided to put this on the list, and I think the defining point of why this made it onto the list was because it was a very deep experience, and the narratives and the way that you got to explore this empty town, and just see the story unfold in front of you through the point of views of different people was just a very emotional experience at times. And I really think that that's what really puts it on our top 10.
Yeah, I think Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. It was certainly an engrossing story. It's hard to say whether this is the sort of game that you go back and sort of want to instantly play again, just because of the pacing of it, because you are essentially locked into walking around this village. Yes, the story is as we said, it's very engrossing. But at the same time, it's a very British version of sci-fi, so it's kind of bleak in places. But certainly, there was moments where I was just absolutely moved throughout this game, and it was just fascinating just going through this village and slowly piecing this story together of where everyone's disappeared to and what's the deal with all these damn lights. But no, I think Everybody's Gone to Rapture. Certainly for myself, it held up, and I mean, Kim, I mean, is this a title that you would still recommend?
Definitely. I think that I do believe Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is kind of like that starting of the walking sims, and it's done incredibly well. So I think it still holds up. Like the story itself still holds up for itself after a few years that it's been out now. It definitely is a story that is worth going to visit. Obviously, walking sims are also for a niche group of people who really enjoy just not having to worry about battle and really liking a strong narrative. And those are the people I recommend Everybody's Gone to the Rapture to. So moving on to number 9. What is our number 9?
Number 9 is Cafe Rain, point and click graphic adventure developed by Clifftop Games and published by Raw Fury Games. This is a real throwback to the LucasArts games as you play the detective slash student Cafe Rain, who is basically investigating the mysterious deaths of her recently deceased grandfather. Along the way, finding and uncovering some secrets which are hidden beneath the surface of this small town. This is a game which it very much in the LucasArts games, it infuriated me as much as it was an enjoyable experience. And certainly graphically and then stylistically, it is a throwback to those games. As you've got your smart-mouthed protagonist here who is basically trying to uncover the truth and find a way to get beneath the surface of this town, which is very much determined to keep its secrets. And it was certainly a fun experience. I think at the same time it's certainly had its moments where it frustrated me, especially with the puzzles. But I mean, how did you find it, Kim?
I thought Kathy Ring was great. I'm not one to be really into the point and click, mostly because I tend to miss a lot of stuff. But Kathy Rain, like you said, there are some puzzles that are really challenging, particularly some at the end that get really challenging, and you really need to, investigate really carefully and really like find the pacing. But I mean, I think like the best part that about this game is Kathy Rain herself. This character is incredible to just watch as she investigates and how she interacts and talks. And plus, this is I believe this is also fully voice acted, if I remember correctly. So it really like gave a really, it was a very immersive experience as well because you can really tell how these characters actually are.
Yeah, it's certainly the voice acting is was really great throughout. Certainly, there's an interesting selection of characters that you have to encounter and interact with as part of your quest. Um, as I said before, though, it does encounter that same issue that the LucasArts games did, where you encounter issues and it basically feels that you've hit those points where you just throw everything at the wall to see what will stick, which can be a little frustrating. Where some Well, perhaps to others, that style of gameplay will bring back those retro memories and just charm them completely. But Cafe Rain, I think, is one of those games we both agree that we would like to see a sequel. Certainly, the character Cafe Rain is interesting enough to warrant her own series, and certainly be interesting to obviously see going forward if they're going to obviously continue and what the future really holds for this character. So that brings us to number 8.
Number 8 is Firewatch from Campo Santo. So Firewatch is, like Elwood mentioned before, it's a kind of like a walking simulator, but it has this additional thing of where you're sent into this national park and you're trying to run away from your own personal life issues. And this character goes and he wants to spend the summer in a Firewatch tower, and then obviously mysteries happen and you start building a relationship with a lady from another tower called Delilah. A lot of this game is the charm of, it's exploring the area that you're in, going on these quests in the different days that you're there. And it also has that additional thing of really feeling like you're hiking because you have to look at your map and figure out what everything is.
Yeah, I mean, Firewatch is certainly a game which lives up to its reputation. If perhaps making us want to dash off and spend a summer working in a Firewatch tower, or maybe that was just myself. It's a game which manages to capture both the tedium of the work that you're doing at the same time having a mystery that perhaps it doesn't quite deliver upon once we hit the ending. But certainly, Campo Santo have created a game with a very unique graphical style. The world feels very immersive. The fact you can find and keep yourself a little pet turtle, and the conversations that you have back and forth over the radio with Delilah, and how your relationship can change with her based on the responses that you give, and your reactions to the world around you really made this such an immersive experience. And certainly when we look to the this year's Game Awards and we saw In the Valley of the Gods, which is currently due for a 2019 release, it makes us very excited to obviously see what the company has in store for us in when it comes to their follow-up. But certainly Firewatch, while perhaps on the shorter side of things, is certainly one of those immersive experiences, and it certainly gives you a little more to play with than your usual walking simulator. Certainly, when we look at Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, this one at least feels that you've got more involvement in the story, and the actions and choices you're making are having more of an impact on the story than we saw with Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. I'd say if the only downside, obviously, to Firewatch, as we mentioned in our review, though, is just that ending is that it builds up this great big mystery and then just perhaps fails to deliver on the payout that we wanted, really.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Obviously, like Firewatch is, it's like what you said. Like Firewatch really delivers on just its narrative is pretty good for a good part, and it actually, it starts off even like right away in day one of just going into your Firewatch tower, and along the way, you really get an idea of what mysteries and how the story really knows how to build the suspense with just everything around it. Definitely a game that we recommend you to play if you haven't checked it out before. And there's a little bit more action than the normal walking simulator, so it might be one that's easier and more immersive to pick up for people that aren't ready to just sit back and just watch walking slowly from one place to the next. Up next is number 7.
Number 7 is Melee Super Turbo Championship Edition. This is a platform beat 'em up, and here you play a masked Mexican wrestler who has to both go through the land of the living and the dead to rescue his girlfriend. This is certainly a unique and colourful title, to say the least, packed with some truly interesting characters and some really fun gaming mechanics at the same time, being the sort of game where it will frustrate you as much as it delights you, as one moment you can be battling skeletons, the others you can be throwing chickens around. It's constantly proved to be a surprising game, and I mean, it's hard to besmirch a game which allows you to turn into a chicken, as well as your amazing powers. And certainly this was a really fun game. It's nice and colourful. The pacing's really great as well, and just even if you're playing it on Steam or console, it works well on either way. And this was one I certainly really enjoyed, and especially as it gives you those sort of throwbacks like Mexican wrestling movies such as like Santo and the Blue Demon. Um, and yeah, I mean, Kim, what did you obviously think of this one?
Yeah, Guacamelee still resounds to me quite a bit. Like there are days that I do want to go back. I think Guacamelee was maybe one of those uh, Metroidvanias that I really like. Um, it was really the tone of it and how enjoyable everything is. Like even when you're fighting bosses and they're incredibly hard at sometimes to get past, there's still this challenge, but over the like if you look past the challenge of it, it is quite satisfying to pass the levels because they are doable. You just really need to figure out what combination of moves you need to do in order to pass that. And sometimes the problem that I had the most was with the controls, and sometimes certain moves were not reacting as well as I'd like them to. I still haven't figured out whether that was my problem or the game's problem. So I'm going to chalk it up to me being not such a great person when it comes to playing these sort of battling games. And for that reason, I mean, I think that this game is really great, especially now that, it's great that we caught up with it because at I think it was the Game Awards or E3, was it? I can't remember. That Guacamelee 2 has been announced for next year. So that's definitely something to look forward to.
Oh yeah, definitely Guacamelee too. We saw that we saw it a couple of places. I mean, we saw it at the Paris showcase from PlayStation. We also saw it at the Video Game Awards. It's been constantly one of those games that sort of pops up as this little under the radar release, and certainly when we see what Drinkbox Studios have got planned for Guacamelee 2, with 4-player co-op, new powers such as the grappling hook. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what moves that they add to the roster. I mean, here we have a game which gives you loads of really fun moves to do. The combat mechanics are really fun and fresh as well. So hopefully they keep all the positives of this game, and just the tweaks that they add are just things which only adds further to the gameplay really. But yeah, it's certainly one of those games that I feel tempted, especially to like pick up like the beta, just so I can have it. Because I feel that if I'm like sitting around the bus stop or doctor's waiting surgery, this would be the sort of game that would be great to have. Especially because if you play in too long a burst, it just becomes a little frustrating. But um, on to number 6. What's pick number 6?
Ori and the Blind Forest by Moon Studios is our next one. And this is a back-to-back for us, is Metroidvania style. We play as Ori, a little spirit, little sprite thing, which has to revive the forest around her. And it's just, I think the best part of this is visually amazing. The music is beautiful. The world they've created and the creatures in it are incredibly fun and also pretty challenging. It's one that, we had been looking forward to play for a really long time. That it definitely didn't disappoint.
Yeah, Ori and the Blind Forest. As you said already, this is another Metroidvania game, and it's fitting that much like Guacamelee, it was also a frustrating experience at times. Um, really building upon what we saw with Seasons After Fall. Here we have an absolutely stunning game, as you said already. I mean, this is like playing inside a painting when you look at this, and it makes us only the more excited with the release of Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which is due out soon. This is an extremely frustrating yet rewarding game. It will quite happily beat you down mercifully, even though it looks absolutely adorable when you think, oh, this is going to be a cute little game. It really proved to be one of the more taxing experiences of this year, and it's really refreshing. I mean, this is one of those games that I think this was picked up by EA Originals to launch their independent wing. So when we saw this game obviously being picked up, much like Unravel, it's really showing that the major studios are taking notice of what the independent studios are doing. And when we look at games like Ori and the Blind Forest, it really reminds us that the independent scene is just as important as the AAA scene, and that they are producing games of similar, if not better quality than we're seeing with the AAA. I mean, certainly we've seen over the years, we saw games like this, the aforementioned Unravel, Journey, these games which are just like really pushing the boundaries, and they're coming from independent studios, which you really wouldn't expect. You would expect something similar, not something as polished and as beautiful as this game looks. Um, yes, I mean, it frustrated the hell out of me in places, and the less said about that tree sequence, the better. But I think that if you're looking for a challenge and want something a bit different, then Ori and the Blind Forest would certainly be it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Ori and the Blind Forest pretty much is a challenging Metroidvania, but very rewarding. At the same time, it also gives a really emotional story, which seems to be continuing with Ori and the Will of the Wisps. So definitely something to look forward to in 2018. Moving on, what's our number five?
Number five is Blood Bowl 2 Legendary Edition. This is probably one of the most anticipated releases of the year, especially for myself. And this is essentially just a big DLC add-on to Blood Bowl 2 from um, Legendary Games, the French independent studio. What the Legendary Edition essentially gave us was not only a bunch of new teams, but it gave us a lot of new tweaks to what was already a fantastic game to begin with. In terms of the teams, we saw ogres, vampires, amazons, halflings, goblin teams, underworld. There was this whole bunch of fantastic new races which really added new elements to the game. We also saw a lot of fun and much appreciated tweaks, such as the ability to add timeouts to the games. We got a new solo mode, which a lot of people have been requesting. And overall, it took what was already a great game and just sort of tweaked it and added that new layer to it, so that if you wanted to, you can either just play the original game, or for the price of just a big DLC, you can upgrade to this Legendary Edition. The downside, of course, being that for people like myself who were holding out for a physical copy of the game, it was only released as a digital download, which is a little frustrating, especially when your space on your hard drive's at a premium. But overall, Blood Bowl 2, it's only added to what was already a fantastic game already. And I mean, Kim, I mean, this was a game that we sort of threw at you because we were lucky enough to get the key for this one.
Yeah, we were very lucky to get the key, and to be honest, I think you were even happier because you finally wrote me into playing Blood Bowl 2 after I promised it over and over again and postponed it. Obviously, what's really nice is that we did a really great chat about review of Blood Bowl 2, and I'm gonna link that on a card in this like up on the in the right side corner. And it was talking about, we were like the amateur and the experienced talking about Blood Bowl 2, and the decisive thing is that I still think about Blood Bowl 2 a lot because it was, I think, one of my biggest surprises this year. It was a very pleasant surprise. The world is like one big, sporting event. And you enter this and you go into Cabal Vision or something. I can't remember the name anymore. And it's these two, this goblin and ogre, I think, that are sports casting this. And they are hilarious because they are amazing to listen to. And it's like when you're playing this game, it's like someone is actually talking about the game at the same time. And there's this, not only is the game itself like a brutal version of football, which took me a while to really pick up, but it's this really just fun experience in general. And you get to build your own team, and it's an amazing world to that they've developed, like just mixing like fantasy with tweaking like of the real life sport. And I think this game really blew me away. Like I think about it all the time now, and I keep wanting to go back, but sometimes it's hard because of this amount of stuff we have to do.
Yeah, I think Blood Bowl 2 it perfectly captured the essence of the tabletop game. At the same time, it's the campaign mode serves as a great tutorial for anyone who's not familiar with the rules. And I mean, this is a game which is at first glance extremely complex with the amount of modifiers as that you can expect from any sort of tabletop game. There are a number of different dice rolls and modifiers to learn. But at the same time, as Kim said, I mean, this is a very immersive world that it's set in. I mean, there's a great sense of humor which runs behind it. So, I mean, you can get like different sponsors such as Bloodweiser and Orchidas choosing. There's a team really to shoot any particular playing style. So if you want to be fast and speedy, you can play as elves, or if you just want to pound your opponent, you can play as orcs. And even if you, the option is obviously there just to create teams of all the races and just like play around with them. And I think combined with the fantastic online community that is with this game, it's just been absolutely fun to play with, and it's still fun to play with, even if you like myself are not particularly good at the game and just sort of enjoy moving the figures around the field. Um, but on to number four. What's the four pick?
Number 4 is Tales from the Borderlands by Telltale Games. This is our December featured game, and it was an experience that brought us back to what made Telltale Games really great, where it's set inside the world of the Borderlands franchise and takes you on a double perspective of two characters called Fiona and Reese. Obviously, there's a lot more here than just being a choice-based narrative cinematic experience. There's other things, mechanics that are implemented here that make it even more fun to play.
Definitely, I think this is probably one of the best Telltale games we've played in a while. Certainly after the disappointment of the original Batman Telltale game. It was kind of with a sense of anxiety that we entered into Telltale's version of Borderlands. I mean, here we have a game which fits actually within the Borderlands timeline. It falls after the events of Borderlands 2, yet at the same time doesn't feel that it has to anchor itself to your original Vault Hunters from that game. Instead, as we said, we follow Reese and Fiona, two new characters who will encounter various familiar faces from the Borderlands series. Um, Here, though, Telltale have managed to capture not only the world of Pandora, but also the sense of humor that runs throughout these games. And just looking at the variety of gameplay throughout this game, from dialogue choices, quick time events, the game constantly proved a source of surprise. The situations that you were going through, and even it's the sort of like when you think you have this game figured out, it will throw something new into the mix, such as the much talked about finger gun sequence, which just proved to be one of the many standouts moments of this game, which is just absolutely peppered with fantastic humor moments, great pop culture, and some real sense of that the choices you make actually matter in this game, which is certainly something that's been missing from a number of Telltale games of late, where it felt very much like the games were on rails and the choices you were making didn't really affect much.
Yeah, I mean, aside from that, I mean, I think what really impressed me was the fact that they were able to really make the action feel like action sequences, which, sadly, despite Batman and Guardians of the Galaxy, which is their latest series that they finished, is it's while being like you watch the movies and these are like super action packed movies and franchises, you thought that it would be different and it'd be like um it's just more like the moves are much better, but Tales from the Borderlands actually ends up being a lot better in the sense that they're implementing like combos, paying like in like the Street Fighter sense, and they have different like faster movements and a lot more action sequences, that it's a really great experience because of that. Number three.
Number three is a game which has been, I would say, for most video game critics, has been the number one choice for 2017. But for ourselves, it is number three, and that is What Remains of Edith Finch, a narrative-driven adventure. Here you play the surviving member of the Finch family as you try to uncover the morbid past and especially the curse which seems to have fallen the Finch family, which seems them all doomed to meet their demise in various creative and often grisly ways. This is a really fascinating game, as it is, as we said, it's a very narrative driven game, so for the most part it did feel very much like it's on rails, but it's also a game which manages to take the various stories which make up the family history of the Finches and present each of them in ever more unique and interesting ways, so that you never know what way the story is going to go as you make your way through the the house previously owned by Edith Finch, which may have started off as a house, but as various family members have moved in, has certainly seen various extensions and Anna alcoves being added onto the house, giving it a real Frankenstein feel, and certainly making it all the more exciting to explore as you discover each of these rooms is more of a shrine to the former inhabitants. And there's certainly a colourful bunch to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Edith Finch was a very strong contender for this year. It's narratively very good, and on top of that, what really is great about this is the fact that it really shows that walking sims can also be done in a very immersive way and done in a way that there could be a lot more interaction in what you're doing rather than just walking around and looking at the sights. As we immerse into each of these stories, as you said, like it's presented in a different way, and each have for some, some are, shorter sequences that feel a little lacking. But for the most part, it still feels really immersive, especially because I think that the house itself has a character. And what's really nice is that the house is, like you said, it's like Frankenstein. It represents each of these people. But you never walk through an actual door because all the doors are locked shut due to an event that happened. And like due to something that I think they had discussed why the doors were locked, and there's only and then like to make it to like be against I think it was Edith Fincher or whoever did it. They ended up drilling peek holes into each of the doors, and where you can peek through, and that would kind of like give you a look into that room also, but you spend most of your time just crawling through little secret doorways and little passages, and it's such an amazing experience, just seeing how like they show a really twisted family in a certain way too.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly a very Ian Banks-esque world that Edith Finch is in. At the same time, this is a game which also gave us working at a cannery simulator, as you can be 1 minute you can be just working on a cannery line, the next you can be living through a Tales from the Crypt style comic book sequence, or perhaps going on a metamorphical journey with one typical Finch child's constant need to satisfy a hunger, or perhaps you're telling a story just through a series of photographs that you're taking. You never know how a story is going to be told, and certainly how a member of the family is going to meet their demise next. And certainly, as we go through the game, they really do meet themselves in some interesting ways that they meet their demise. Some of them funny, some of them tragic. It's a real mixture, and it's you can see why it's been so highly rated and why it's held such appeal to both critics and gamers alike. But yeah, what remains of Edith Finch is certainly number three for ourselves in 2017. But what's number two, Kim?
Number two is maybe an odd choice, and not a lot of people will know it, I feel. Is from Spooky Doorway, a team that we luckily had a chance to talk to. They were funny and comedic and really reflects on the game that came out of this, called the Darkside Detective, which is a point and click experience, I would say. Would you call that a point and click experience?
Yeah,
And
this
and it's really nice because it does different cases. So the story doesn't really flow, but it focuses on Detective McQueen and Officer Dooley, who are a pretty odd pairing as a, buddy cop type of detective team that goes on to solving these occult and supernatural going-ons in the Twin Lake City.
Yeah, I mean, Darkside Detective certainly, I think it's one of my favorite under the radar titles of 2017. Certainly, this is a game which has got it's got a sense of humor very similar to Terry Pratchett in the fact that you play this detective who works for his very underfunded department, in that he's assigned to the Darkside Division, and you get the sense that he's been basically assigned there just to keep him out of trouble, really. But he only between him and his partner of sorts, Officer Dooley, they only seem to constantly find ever more unique ways to find further trouble for themselves. And this is a really fantastic game. I mean, when you go over the course of 6 cases, you battle gremlins, you go to alternate dimensions, you discover portals. It's one of those games which manages to really give us something that feels absolutely fresh, even though it's working with a very retro style. The writing is incredibly sharp in this game, so even though the graphics may look a little retro, you will stay unquestionably for the writing, as it's probably some of the sharpest and funniest writing that we've seen. And again, it's just one of those throwbacks to like the classic LucasArts games. Um,
Yeah.
Especially if you like things like just like Day of the Tentacle or Sam and Max, or even like Secret Monkey Island, I think you really get a kick out of this game, and it's a bit more so if you're a fan of pop culture humor, as we obviously get the obvious nods to the likes of Twin Peaks and X Files and old classic horror movies as well. It really sort of adds that extra level to it if you're a fan of the genre. And I think this was a game where I was never bored. I was just really happy to play through it, and the only sort of gripe that we had with the game as such was the fact that it has one mode of gameplay where you basically find anything that you can steal, and then try and find where you need to put said items in.
Yeah.
But that being said, there are some really interesting puzzles, some creative solutions for the puzzles as well, including the use of an interdimensional toilet in one particular scene, which we thought was pretty inspired. So, Darkside Detective is a game really worth discovering if you haven't already, and Certainly, if anything, it's my top under the radar hit for this year. Certainly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Darkside Detective is really, really fantastic, and it's definitely one that comes highly recommended for the both of us. I mean, I think that was the game that hit 5 out of 5 for us the first time this year. So definitely a winner on our side, and one that, when thinking about it, I mean, when we were putting this together, it was one of the top titles that came to us as well. So now for the big game, our best game of the year.
Our number one title for 2017 is Little Nightmares. This is from Tazia Studios, and this is a title that was actually snubbed recently at the Video Game Awards, receiving no nominations, no awards, yet we're awarding it our number one game of the year because we thought it was absolutely fantastic. This is a game where you play the yellow anorak wearing six as you try to escape the moor, a vast and mysterious vehicle inhabited by grotesque characters who will often try and consume you while ruled by the old mysterious lady. This is a game which, if you are a fan of The Secret Life of Tom Thumb, will be very appealing to you. And certainly playing this game, it feels like you're playing like a stop motion animation. But this was an absolutely beautiful game. It's absolutely stunning, and certainly gave us more than a few shocks along the way.
You know, Little Nightmares was, while Blood Bowl 2 was your most anticipated game of this year, Little Nightmares was my most anticipated of 2017. And I think that why I really like why I think it really deserves being the best game of the year for us is the fact that while it, some people could argue that for the price tag that it has, it is slightly short. It runs at about 4 hours long. Um, it is a really great experience that didn't disappoint. It offered shocks. It gave you really, really brutal experiences. You really connected with Six, and on certain levels, you even felt like while you were playing as Six, you also felt like you were watching her because she can, one of the things I really like to do is moving her to the front of the screen so she feels like she's touching the wall. Like they're very aware of the bubble that she is in, that, she is in a game, she is trapped in something. And obviously we haven't had time to look at the DLCs yet, but they also came out with 2 more DLCs, and there should be one that's coming out in January, which plays as a continuation, is another character in the story parallel to what's going on. And the world that they've created, there's reminiscent scenes of Studio Ghibli, like there's Spirited Away. Obviously, one of the scenes feels that way, and it's just a really, really it's no narrative as well. So it tells its story by just going through the motions with Six and watching her as the story unfolds. And we even, these are the games, which is like Inside and Limbo, where you can, if you really love the game like we did, you're going to try and think about the theories of what you felt about the story and what happened to Six at the end.
Oh, unquestionably so, and I think you hit it on the head there when you mentioned Insiders. That's certainly the closest comparison I can think to this game. And certainly if you go back and watch our review, we did actually go into the theories of what we felt was actually going on in this game because there is no narrative to speak of, and it's really very suggestive of why characters act the way they do and why the story plays out the way it does. Um, but this is a world where you can be playing, obviously dealing with platforms in the foreground, where in the background there's so much detail going on. You see like passengers coming onto the moor for the dining experiences. There's scenes such as like the dining hall where you're running across the table and characters are actually scrabbling to try and grab Six. Um, it's just such an exciting and unique vision that we have for this game. It's really quite unlike anything else that we've seen, and it makes it only the more surprising the fact that it didn't get at least a nomination. at the Video Game Awards, or just some sort of recognition that it really did deserve. And I hope really by it being our top game of the year, it's gone some way to correcting that in some small way. So
Hopefully that's gonna be what happens. I mean, Little Nightmares, kind of blew my mind a little. Um, Much like our top three really all did achieve that in its different ways. With that said, this wraps up our top 10 2017 games that we reviewed. If you are looking for just 2017 games and an overview of that episode should be coming up soon if it hasn't already been released. So thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. Head over to our home base, thatmomentin.com, to read gaming reviews. To get gaming news every single day, you can follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook at GameWar Podcast. You can hang out with us over on our Twitch channel where we stream at GameWar Podcast, and we also share our gaming obsessions on Instagram, instagram.com/GameWar Podcast. Till next time, bye!